All right, how's everybody doing? We're gonna talk a little bit about the Industrial Revolution. Um, Usually, when we talk about the Industrial Revolution, there are two industrial revolutions that are often discussed. The first Industrial Revolution began in Great Britain. This was at the end of the 1700s, and as you can see on the slide, steam power, textiles, iron, the telegraph was all a characteristic of uh, the um, the first industrial revolution. So in history, usually when you take like a world history class, the industrial revolution that they talk about is this industrial revolution. When you talk about when you take an American history class, however, it's usually the second industrial revolution. The second industrial revolution began in the United States and Germany, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize is how at the end of the 1800s, the late 19th century, how powerful of an economy Germany had. In fact, today, Germany also has a very powerful economy. The characteristics of the second industrial revolution, you can see on the screen: the electricity, the light bulb, the internal combustion engine, oil, steel, film, the telephone, the phonograph. All these things characterize the second industrial revolution. Usually, I think probably everybody that's listening to this uses the internal combustion engine, of course, when you just drive your vehicle. What are some of the causes of the second industrial revolution? Well, the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War from 1861 to 1865, created a huge demand for products. War always does, and that's why not sometimes people say that war influences or helps the economy. That's not necessarily always the case, but there are instances of that in our history. I mean, World War II is a perfect example, and at least in the Union states, the Civil War, I mean, that was definitely the case. Um, Also, obviously, you had a lot of technological advances. Um, Edison, of course, some people consider him one of the greatest inventors of all time. I don't know about that, but certainly in history. Alexander Graham Bell often gets the credit for telephone, although some people sort of dispute that. Like, you find a lot of these kinds of disputes in history. Gottlieb Daimler also often gets the credit for the automobile. It was not Henry Ford, although Henry Ford was, of course, instrumental in making the automobile affordable to everyone. Much like, I guess, Bill Gates was not the inventor of the computer, but made it affordable to a lot of people. In the late 1800s, at the World's Fair in Paris, the Eiffel Tower was built in order to show what could be used with steel. I mean, the flexibility of steel. And of course, many Parisians at the time did not like the Eiffel Tower. They thought that it was an eyesore and just an ugly sign of modernity, or an ugly sign of, of this new modern world. Um, the causes and the results of the second industrial revolution, those kind of go hand in hand. I mean, some things sort of caused it. Something, you could say some things were the result, but it's sort of a chicken and an egg type situation there. Example, one of the causes of a major, it caused major problems for the Native Americans, especially in the Great Plains, or the Plains Indians between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains, mainly because the railroad companies that were building out there would hire hunters to go and kill off the buffalo. And usually you hear about buffalo hunters going out there to get the hide and the tongue. And I mean, that did have an effect, but really it was the railroads that went out there and just shot up the buffalo to the point that some say by 1900, there were about 500 left, a little over 500 in North America. I've seen some estimates as low as 50, and of course that was their major resource. Also, kind of a result of the Industrial Revolution was the rise of big businesses. You need to read in your book um, about these. Some people called them robber barons. Other people called them captains of industry. It really kind of depends on your perspective. Um, J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, for example. And there were different ways in which they consolidated businesses or created monopolies. One was a horizontal um, uh, integration. In other words, what they um, tried to do, or not tried to do, what they did was they just, if you have a company that sells a certain product and you start making money, then you just start buying out your competition. Vertical integration is a little bit different because it's kind of like when you are involved in every aspect of a product, from getting the product, whether it's oil or you're harvesting some product, all right, and then you own all the refineries, you own the transportation, you own everything all the way up to, let's say if it's oil, all the way up to the gas station. All right, that's vertical integration. Pools are when competitors would get together and fix prices, and this is where a lot of antitrust or anti-monopoly laws were passed. For example, the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890, which was never really enforced until the early 1900s. We're going to talk a little bit about immigration. Again, usually when you talk about immigration during this period in the late 1800s and early 1900s, you have to differentiate between the new immigration and the old immigration. The old immigration didn't really cause much of a splash. Um, Most of the people were from the northern part and the western part of Europe. There should be an E right there at the end of Europe. Sorry about that. And this occurred in the mid 1800s. And because many of them were Protestant, the Irish who came over as a result of the potato famine, one of was a major reason, um, were an exception, but most of them were Protestant, and they settled in, almost except for the Irish, the rest of them settled in rural areas. For example, a lot of German immigrants came in and settled in the Midwest, some of whom actually also eventually moved down to Southwest Louisiana. It's possible that if you have a German last name, um, that you may have come from that area, but also it's possible that you didn't. But you see places like Oberlin, Louisiana, or Kinder, Iowa. These places were settled by people that came in from the Midwest. Although there were people that lived there prior to that as well. They just didn't establish those towns. Um, the That was the old immigration. Now the new immigration was in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It was much larger. People were not Protestant, uh, and so as a result, they encountered a lot more discrimination. A lot of them were Catholic, Jewish, Eastern Orthodox, and growing up in South Louisiana, there's a strong Catholic population. We don't think that's a big deal, but in the rest of the country, I mean, for a long time, Catholics were really looked down upon. And so there was a huge anti-immigrant, or what's known as the nativist movement that began really in the early 1900s, maybe the 19 teens, and really what became much stronger during World War I, especially obviously when the United States got involved. So because it was much larger, because they didn't speak English, because they were of a different religion, because they settled in cities, people were threatened by them, and this gave rise to what's known as the nativist movement. And so that's just a real quick little lecture. We'll see if this helps you any. All right, thanks.